It's my great pleasure and honor to welcome you all here today and to Meah's family, to welcome Meah, to introduce her to you, and also to serve as moderator. I should note that I wasn't supposed to be moderator initially. The discussion was supposed to be moderated by Professor Shoda Burhanu from philosophy, but unfortunately she couldn't make it. So, I can't recall when I first met Meah. By the way, I'm Mark Freeman from the Department of Psychology. Sorry about that. I'm wondering, who is this guy? I can't recall when I first met Meah, but it was sometime before she took my personality and the life story class, and essentially proclaimed that she wanted to do a book on Black women alumni's experience at Holy Cross. In response, I said something to the effect of, pretty large topic, Meah. She in turn said something like, well, we have the book Fraternity by Diane Brady, which looks at Black men's experience. Time for doing something similar for the women. Meah will say more about this in just a little bit. Anyway, she offered this proclamation to me with real energy and passion, and probably a big smile or a laugh, and maybe even a joyous little dance, which she's kind of come to do more over the course of the past year. Really audacious in a wonderful, wonderful way, enterprising, venturesome. I didn't know at the time what role I would play in the project, if any, but as the local narrative psychology person who seemed interested in this sort of thing, I told her I would support her in her efforts in whatever way I could. Flash forward to the fall of this year when Meah came to speak with me once again about the project, which she had actually begun over the summer with Professor Shoda Burhanu and had decided to continue. I'll need 2 semesters, she told me, probably with another one of those smiles or laughs. And she's just not the kind of student to say no to. And not the kind of student I would want to say no to. She was hungry and she was driven and as committed as ever to carry out this project. And the project is an extremely important one. And so we commenced reading, discussing, thinking about how to carry out the next phase of the project, methods-wise, about how to organize the huge quantity of information that would eventually be shared, how to make sense of it all, and last but certainly not least, how to write about it. I think it's safe to say that on some level, Meah didn't know what she had gotten herself into. Right? She didn't know the scale of this sort of project. This is big, Professor Freeman, she might have said to me, way bigger than anything she had ever done. There may have been a little twinge of uncertainty or even fear at these times. I can recall her saying things like, I don't know, Professor Freeman. Well, this stands to reason. It was big. It is big. And it wasn't like writing a paper, right? It was like doing a thesis or a book, right? Some rough times. And when it came to the writing part, there had to be some tough love as well. I don't think I was mean or anything, although she might disagree. But I was pretty demanding at times. My defense, I had to be. Why? Because the project demanded it. And because I knew through it all that Meah had the intelligence, the tenacity, the resilience, and the creativity to make it happen, as indeed she has. For some reason, the word she sometimes used to describe some of the exchanges she had with me was that she was, quote, roasted. Well, Meah, I think it was worth it. And that's because It's hard for me to resist this. It all turned out well, Don. It all turned out well. I couldn't resist that. Anyway, I will close by saying just a couple other things. It has been an immense gift to work with Meah this year. I hope you know that. I hope you feel that. And I'm extremely proud of her and the work she's done. Earlier this week, I asked Meah to send me a resume. I knew she had done a lot, but since I knew I'd be giving this intro, I figured I ought to check it out, get some of the info, right? It's kind of ridiculous. Psychology major, Africana Studies major, varsity track and field, head peer mentor, Odyssey mentor, Black Student Union Executive Board, Patriot League Student Athletes of Color Coalition, vice president for the class of 2022, Redican Medal winner, the Carter G. Woodson Award for Africana Studies. And there's a decent chance she'll be receiving some additional recognition in relatively short order, right? All of this really well-deserved and well-earned. It's time now for you to see for yourself. It is again my great pleasure and honor to introduce Meah Austin. Come on.
Thank you for that, Professor Freeman. Very kind words. I almost want to shed a tear, but we'll save that for later. And I want to, before I get started, thank JD Power Center and the McFarland Center for co-sponsoring this event. So as Professor Freeman mentioned, I began this research in the summer of 2021 in the Weiss Summer Research Program, which was advised under Professor Shorter Berhanu. And Professor Shorter Berhanu gave me a better understanding of Africana Studies theories, as I can call it, but I realized I needed to do more. So during this experience, I interviewed 10 Black women alumni who graduated between 1976 and 1995. And like I just mentioned, I realized I needed to do more. For one, I wanted to interview more recent alumni. I also wanted to better understand narrative analysis, the methods I was using. And finally, there were some interview questions I didn't get to ask in the first round that I needed to ask moving forward. Okay, so the why. Now, I almost want to skip this slide before you all get a chance to see my heat-damaged phase, my cringy middle school years. But nonetheless, as this picture demonstrates, I grew up in predominantly white schools my whole life. And these schools made me realize the ways in which my race and gender made me very different from my peers. So that's one reason I took on this research. Now, as Professor Freeman also mentioned, I took on this research because Holy Cross has a very interesting racial history. It was founded in 1843, and before that, during that, Black men were sprinkled into class years up until 1968 when Father Brooks welcomed a larger class of Black men. But it still took until 1972 for Black women and women in general to be admitted into the college. So what does this mean? It means that Black men and Black women had very interesting experiences during the time at the Hill. But what I see is that these experiences in the image above have been documented for Black men, but this has not been done in a similar capacity for Black women. So my research is motivated by the following. What experiences are unique to Black female students? How does resilience manifest in the lives of Black female students at the college? And finally, how do these alumni come to understand their Holy Cross experience as they look back at it? I relied on narrative analysis, which falls under the umbrella of qualitative analysis. Now, what narrative analysis attempts to do is explore and conceptualize the human experience with an understanding that people live and grow to understand their experiences in storied form. So including both my summer research and my academic year research, I interviewed a total of 18 Black women alumni of the College of the Holy Cross who graduated between 1976 and 2020. The interviews explored their pre-college experiences, their academic and social lives, and how they made meaning to their overall experience at the college. Now, I can't give every single interview question, but some of them include, how did you get to Holy Cross? How do you feel in social spaces such as Kimball or parties? And how has your Holy Cross experience contributed to what you do in the world? I relied on Black feminist thought and intersectionality theory in comprising my interview questions, as well as interpreting the data. And what I love the most about both of these theories is that it aims to bring awareness to the various identities that many Black women hold, and how these identities manifest different experiences. So the lives explored, I explored these women's academic life in my first chapter, then I move on to the social life in my second chapter, and my third chapter is identity. Now, in identity, I explored how these women come to understand their identities as they lived it, and also as they look back at their time at Holy Cross. Each of the three chapters have different subsections with a lot of data. Like, I cannot even explain how many quotes I have. So moving forward in the remainder of my presentation, I'm going to survey a few of the subsections of each chapter with one or two, and if y'all are lucky, 3 of the quotes. So before I get started, I want to put something in all of your ear, put it in the back of your mind, and I want that to be the term creative resilience, which leads us to reimagine resilience in Black women college students. So as my presentation will demonstrate, many of these women have demonstrated creative resilience through their ability to navigate, resist, and transform the dominant culture of the college, but also find themselves in the community. So my first chapter, Academic Life, explores these women's experiences of being the only one, the academic rigor at the college, code switching in academic spaces, and their relationships with professors and peers. Now, my first subsection is titled Navigating a New World. And what this does is it thinks about the issue of preparedness and systemic disadvantages that many of these women encountered in their early college navigation. But it should be noted that some of these women had very minimal challenges when it came to adjusting to Holy Cross's demands. But for others, Holy Cross caught them by surprise. Barbara, class of 1995, shares, "These white students were just better prepared to exceed in that environment. Black students going to Catholic school were in some respects just better prepared to succeed in that environment. So I had to increase and come around the learning curve." Liana, class of 2009, similarly recalls, "I had to eventually come to a space where I'm like, okay, I'm smart, I'm intelligent, but my classmates had more accessibility to things than I did. Like, they had tutors if they needed extra assistance. Meanwhile, I was the one tutoring people when I was in high school and younger. Their schools gave them access to certain courses. Like, I was lucky to be able to learn 2 languages, Spanish and French, before getting to Holy Cross. But I know a lot of students in my position probably didn't study a language, or if they did study a language, it was the bare minimum, and they weren't really taught to be fluent." So these women reinforce that one's background is especially important in how they come to navigate the academic demands of college. But what I also see is, despite the lack of resources in their pre-college education, both Barbara and Liana were able to prevail in not only strengthening the necessary academic skills, but also reminding themselves that they can academically succeed. I now move on to the subsection titled Being the Only One, which thinks about what it means to be the only Black student, the only Black woman, or even the only student of color in the classroom. Kelly, class of 2020, shares, "So most of the time, I was the only Black person, and I hate to say it, but sometimes it did intimidate me. Like, if I knew I didn't finish the reading last night, I wasn't going to say anything that may not be right. So that mindset of whatever I say has to be right, or has to add something, or I'm just going to be quiet the whole class period, that was something I struggled with a lot." Lily, class of 1982, shares, "I kind of tried my best to be as not seen as possible. I remember my history class sitting in front of the class so I didn't have to look at the back of anybody's heads or whatever they were doing. This was to keep myself focused on being there because, for the most part, there were no more than 1 or 2 Black people in a room. So I'm the only one. So I was like, if you're gonna stare, you're gonna stare from the back of my head. I don't know, maybe I wasn't trying to feel the pressure of being the only one in the room. Like, half the time, I never even had conversations." So Kelly's and Lily's quotes emphasize the emotional toll that comes with being the only one in academic spaces. But they demonstrate more. In Lily's case, her act of sitting in front of the classroom not only resists the feelings of being the only one, but it also demonstrates her ability to be present, to learn, and to be focused in a majority white classroom. I now move on to my final subsection of the academic life, titled Blending into a Seat. which explores these women's experiences in their relationships with their classmates and peers. Luna, class of 1979, shares, "If I had something to say in class, I would say it. And there are often times where Caucasian students would repeat what I just said, and I got them straight. I would say, 'Didn't I just say that?'" So Luna's quote conveys how many of these women were still able to be vocal, still be their truest selves in their experiences with white students, even if they were the only one. And in this section, I also come to realize that many of these women are able to succeed in the classroom that differs from them, not only visibly, such as their race and gender, but also mentality-wise, such as how they come to believe and see the world. This is evident in Issa, class of 2000, who shares, "I found it very important to go into a place that challenged everything, my identity and the things that I took for granted inherently. I had to learn how to articulate and then back it up with history and facts, which is the greatest weapon. It made me virtually unstoppable." So altogether, Luna and Issa convey the inherent challenges that oftentimes comes with being the only one in the classroom. But they further convey that despite these challenges, many of these women are able to still be resourceful and innovative in how they're able to enter the spaces they're in. Now I move on to social life, which explores the culture shock, social aggression, and violence many of these women face, their roommate experiences, the party scene, dating life, and so forth. So the first subsection, culture shock, explores how these women came to realize, this culture is different, you know? Issa, class of 2000, notes, "I felt very different in social scenes because there were like unspoken rules, a culture I didn't know about. Like Birkenstocks, what are those? What are we doing? Why are you wearing sandals and socks?" Now Ruby, class of 1991, shares, "I didn't realize how poor we were, and I wasn't even poor. Both my parents were blue-collar workers. I had a house in a working-class neighborhood, but I was going to school with kids whose dad was the owner of New York Giants or whose father was the CEO of Hershey." So what both of these women demonstrate is how Holy Cross's environment often reminded them that they were different from the campus majority. Now I move on to my subsection titled "Two Cultures, One Room," which explores the residential life and the residential experiences of these women. Now I know a lot of students in the room can attest to the fact that housing is really important in college, right? And what I come to realize, especially in their first year at the college, is that what was most pivotal in their overall housing experience was the treatment, behaviors, and actions, treatment, behaviors, and actions by their roommates. Now, some roommates had great experiences. They walked to Kimball holding hands with their roommates, walked back up and, just watched a movie. But I also see that other women have some very deeply emotional experiences. So I want to look at Molly, class of 2002. Now, Molly shares, "My roommate was this Caucasian girl who was never around diverse neighborhoods or around other people of color. So for her, it was like, I've never been around Black people. And I'm thinking, okay, what's your point? In high school, I was around my friends who were white and were okay with me being Black. But Holy Cross showed me that not everyone is going to have that same welcoming. So I didn't even end up staying with that roommate at all. That girl I was originally supposed to live with felt uncomfortable with me because I was Black. And her parents felt uncomfortable. And guess what? I felt uncomfortable too. You feeling uncomfortable is making me feel uncomfortable. You're making me feel like I'm not even welcomed in my own room." Now Molly further goes on to share, "It hurt because I didn't do anything to her. The only issue here is that I'm Black. And you're not even willing to have an open mind. You're not willing to say, oh my gosh, this is a great learning opportunity for me, a great cultural learning opportunity for me. You're like, I'm so used to being around my people, and that's how I want to keep it." So it did hurt, but I didn't want her to see that because I feel like if she saw it hurt, she would consider it a win, and I didn't want her to think she won. So for some of these women, like Molly, their rooming experiences, a place where they're supposed to feel most at home, most comfortable, was met with some immense pain and hurt. Now, Molly's statement proves just why connections with similarly identifying people is so important for Black women. My next subsection, titled "My People," considers the social networks, friendships, and community that many of these women built during their college years. And what becomes evident is that the Black community was very pivotal of their overall college experience. Josephine, class of 1991, shares, "The Black community became brothers and sisters to each other. I had an excellent group of friends and people around me, and we all supported each other." Lily, class of 1982, shares, "In Kimball, when you first come out the doors, that's where the Black people sat at. The Black people pretty much sat at one table. And it felt comfortable, super, super comfortable, because every other place is not as welcoming to you." And finally, Olivia, class of 1989, shares, "I think Black students were all activists through our outward expression, like the plays, where we brought very moving plays and dramas, or our own BSU parties, and the music we would bring to campus. So through the words of Olivia, Lily, and Josephine, it is evident that there is a power within the Black community, a power in its ability to recognize and support one another. But looking closely at Olivia's point, it becomes clear that the actions of the Black community were not only of a benefit to Black students, but also the campus community as a whole. I now move on to my final section, or chapter, Identity Life, or Identity, which explores the intersections of the many identities that these women hold and how they manifest different experiences. Now, in this chapter, I also point out the ability of these women to also form and understand their identities in their own way. And finally, I consider how these women come to make meaning of their overall college experience. So now in Holy Cross Know Me, I consider the things these women wish Holy Cross knew about them, or pieces of their identity that they felt went unnoticed during their time at the college. Josephine, class of 1991, shares, "I had a mission when I came to Holy Cross, and that was to introduce me. While I was finding me, I was introducing me. I decided that if Holy Cross wasn't going to give me diversity, I would be it. And I wasn't holding the banner for my Black race or my Black woman, I was holding the banner for me." So Josephine, like other women in the section of my thesis, demonstrates the authenticity, the originality that many Black women students carried into the many spheres of their life on their time at the Hill, or on the Hill. My next subsection is titled, I Survived, which explores how these women come to perceive their overall college experience as one of survival, perseverance, but also one accompanied with pain and regret. Stella, class of 1987, shares, "I knew exactly what I was doing when I chose Holy Cross. That's why I wouldn't allow myself to get caught up in it, because I chose it. So I'm the author of this story. So what I'm gonna do? Sit here and bitch? No, I'm gonna walk it out. There would be times when I would come home and I told my mom some of the stuff, and she would say, 'Look, you can come home. You don't have to stay there.' And I'm like, nah, I started it, so I'm gonna finish it." Yes, there were some encounters I didn't anticipate, but there were also some fun things I didn't anticipate either. So Stella depicts how many of the Black women students were able to recognize that they create their own story, a story of perseverance, a story of valuable memories, and more, no matter what hurdles may be in their way. I now move on to my subsection, my favorite one, called We Are Sisters, We Stick Together. Anyone watch Cheetah Girls before? So I'm not sure if it's the song title or lyric, but I remember We Are Sisters, We Stick Together. Now in that song, the four girls talk about how they're sisters, how they stick together, how they're in community with one another, and how they're able to support each other in meaningful ways, form an alliance even. And so what I realized is that Black women students at the college did something very similarly. Olivia, class of 1989, shares, "There was a tightness among the Black community at the time, especially the Black women. It was a place where we can go and talk, lift each other up, talk about the craziness, but it also helped you to hear their experience. So thinking about the other women who were already on campus, they kind of helped give us a rite of passage, but at the same time, we supported one another to become who we are." Now, Olivia perfectly sums up the fact that despite the everyday challenges and despite the necessary navigation these women had to do, they were able to rely on each other. They were able to find each other. They were able to be with each other in meaningful ways. And something else I want to point out is that even though we're Black women, we have so many different intersections and identities that go beyond our race and gender. There's ethnicities, sexualities, geographic origins. And these women, even though their only common thread may have been Black women, they were able to still find each other, support, love one another. And I think that's something really powerful. My next subsection is titled Figuring It All Out, and it especially taps into the reflective lens of these women as they look back at their college years. Ruby, class of 1991, says, "For some of us, Holy Cross took us out. It wore us down. and we didn't come back for a little bit. Holy Cross can take you out. We have some folks whose experience was so traumatic, they never rebounded from it. Lily, class of 1982, shares, I have never been to a homecoming. I've never been back to campus since graduation day. And I think it was my hurt, my pain, my lack of coming to terms with what I had experienced. I had to come to a point where I had to forgive and say whatever happened, happened. Whatever I didn't feel, I didn't feel. What did I get out of it? I got great friendships that have lasted over 40 years. I got a great education. It wasn't everything I wanted, but it did teach me something. And I'm foolish not to, even with the bad things, learn from them, because then I really wasted my time. And I got a lot out of it, and I hope to give a lot back to it, or I gave a lot back to it, excuse me. So Ruby and Lily bring awareness to how not only attending the college, but also coming back as an alumnae is a very difficult experience for some. But as Lily's quote conveys, these women are still able to see the good in their overall college years. Many of these women have been able to recognize that the benefits exist in their college experience, even if there were apparent negatives. Now, my final section, titled Looking Back, conveys the lessons and values that many of these women have come to recognize after their experience on the Hill. Issa, class of 2000, shares, as a Black woman, a Puerto Rican woman, a Black Latina, I was struggling to find my confidence, and I'm still really battling with not being accepted or seen as beautiful. You know, having a lot of feelings until I was like, excuse my language, fuck this man-made mentality of beauty. It just takes living. And I wish I can go back and remove that self-doubt and those many tears of my younger self. I'd love to see a world where Black girls don't have to go through that at all, because not everyone has to go through all that. It's an experience reserved when you're feeling like the other. I'm fighting for a world where Black girls don't have to think of any of that stuff. And Lily, class of 1982, states, who I am each day, hopefully, is the person trying to instill confidence and ability and grounding in terms of, yes, you are worthy, no matter who you are, no matter what you do, and no matter how much money you have. You are still good, and you are still worthy. And wherever you go, you can do anything. So I'm hopeful that I instill this in my son, my daughter, and my students. So as Issa and Lily show, their time at Holy Cross played an instrumental role in how they grown to understand not only their identities, but who they want to be in the world. So as we transition to the conclusion, I want to share a quote by Jones and Shorter Gooden in their book called Shifting. They write, Black women have so much to offer our country, so many gifts to share with all of us. And yet, as a society and as a nation, we have never quite stopped to appreciate the truth of their experience, the verity of what it feels like to be Black and a female, the reality that no matter how intelligent, competent, and dazzling she may be, a Black woman in our country today still cannot count on being understood and embraced by mainstream white America. So as Jones and Shorter Gooden demonstrate, there is often so much that comes with being a Black woman that often goes unnoticed by society. As my presentation depicts, this truth also applies for Black women students at the college. One gift that appears to apply to all of the women I interviewed, and arguably all Black women who have spent or are spending their 4 years on the Hill, is their ability to demonstrate creative resilience. So what do I mean by this? I'm sure if I was to ask a few people in the crowd what resilience means to them, they would say something like overcoming adversity or adapting to circumstances. Now, this definition of resilience rings true in a quote by Menachem in his book, My Grandmother's Hands. He writes, over generations, many of us African Americans have developed thick emotional skins in a variety of ways. This has served us well, protecting us from a great deal of damage and pain in a dangerous world. This is how resilience works. It doesn't always create full healing, but it may build protection and prevent or blunt future wounding. So as you have seen from the quotes I've shared today, these women have developed an emotional skin that has made their circumstances endurable, but also an opportunity to flourish. Yet their resilience goes beyond creating this emotional skin. There's an emotional creativity present there too. So let's consider academic life. These women were able to enter spaces where they were the only one, not only in how they looked, but also how they perceived the world. These women were also able to remind themselves that they were at Holy Cross for a reason and that they can do great things academically. So if you ask me, this is creative resilience. Now let's think about it in the social lives. Most obviously, these women were able to support each other, find each other, and be with each other in meaningful ways. They brightened one another's experiences, even if there were challenges present. And at the same time, the social events that the Black community brought to Holy Cross, such as the plays and BSU parties, I know some of y'all know about that, transformed this mainstream culture. So in the social life, what I see is that their resilience is also communal. And finally, in my identity chapter, these women demonstrate creative resilience once again, whether it was making a point to be a force on Holy Cross's campus, or reflecting on the valuable lessons they learned at the time at the college, or even affirming and celebrating other Black women and forming an alliance. These women were, once again, creatively resilient. So resilience in Black women students at the college is innovative. It's flexible, it's resourceful, it's expressive, and it's versatile. These women have been able to attain personal goals, grow in unique ways, and most obviously, graduate college. Now, as someone crawling to the DCU Center, it's no easy task. And finally, the reflective lens of these women is worthwhile to mention. As you know, I interviewed people that have had great distance from the college. And what I see is that they're still able to look at new and ongoing positives and experiences and rewards of their Holy Cross education. So arguably, I would say creative resilience is present in all Black women in all walks of life. So my takeaway for this presentation is, yes, Holy Cross was tough at times for many of these women. Yes, it has some painful recollections. But these women's past and present emotional creativity, communal creativity, and transformative creativity is an enduring legacy of Black women students at the college. Thank you. And once again, I just want to thank Professor Freeman. You know, I can imagine it was not always easy working with me. I know I have my moments. Professor Shorter Burhanu for, helping me start this research. The J.D. Power Center and McFarland Center. And as we transition to the panel, I also want to thank my panelists too. So, thank you. Okay. Whew, let me see. Okay, so if we can begin, I would love it if each of my panelists can introduce themselves, class year, and anything else relevant to them.
Hi, everyone. My name's Alison. I'm a member of the class of 2022. I'm from New York City, and my family is from Ghana.
Hi, everyone. I'm Ashley Fortune. I'm a member of the class of 2023. I'm from Cambridge, and my parents are Haitian. Yeah.
My name is Sagine Louis. I'm class of 2024. I'm also from Cambridge, Mass, and my family's from Haiti.
My name is Shaunice. I am Shaunice Afriyeb. I am a member of the class of 2025, and I'm from Pawtucket, Rhode Island, and my family is from Ghana.
Thank you. So to get us started, what stuck out to you in terms of academic life, social life, and identity sections of this presentation, especially considering your own experiences at the college?
I can start. What really resonated with me a lot was, I don't remember who said this, but one of the women you interviewed had mentioned something about not raising their hands like in class, like only participating when they had something that they thought was like worthy of contributions or even like just being right. And I definitely resonated with that a lot because I struggle with like raising my hand in class. Like even if I have something like that's definitely like right or worthwhile to say, I won't raise my hand because out of the fear of just being wrong, because I don't like to be wrong, but I'm trying to get more comfortable with it. And also like I don't remember who said it either, but I usually sit in the front of every single one of my classes. And it's because I have anxiety and I don't like to see people's faces. So I sit right under the nose of every professor in every single class that I'm with. Just so like if I was, let's just say, like get an answer wrong, like I don't have to see everybody's like eyes on me and feel the judgment. And then also like walking into classrooms on the first day of school, like I already know like I'm gonna walk into the classroom. There's a high percentage that I'll be the only Black woman there too. So it just like relieves some stress on my part. And it's interesting that that's some trauma that's shared throughout all the experiences of Black women.
Yeah, I think I resonated with everything. I mean, it's interesting how every single thing that someone said, I said, yep, that happened to me too. So just to be brief, I guess, academically, I really resonated with taking over your voice in your space. As a Black woman in STEM, that's the number one thing I find that's very interesting amongst my white peers, is that I'll say a thought and they'll just say it, and then out of fear of being deemed kind of like difficult or kind of deemed like, you know, hard to work with or like aggressive, I just do this like little stare where it's like, because they know I just said it, but like in different ways. Culture-wise, I had a huge culture shock, and I was very interested to hear that even those who came from predominantly white schools still had that difficulty of a culture shock. I went to a predominantly Haitian school, but everybody was remotely Black in my school. Yeah, she's laughing because she went. Everybody was Black, and you know, that was normal. So to walk down Fenwick and every wall be covered with a white man, like perpetually staring at me, was a very intense emotional experience for me. And then also, I really resonated with the housing aspect, living with roommates and especially those who are white. I had predominantly roommates of color, but we were in a forced triple in the vault. And if everyone knows, the vault has a lot of history at Holy Cross because that's where they placed the first women who attended here Holy Cross. So to be in that same space and have that space be predominantly women of color, more specifically Black, was a very like eerie experience for me. So that was another thing that I found very resonating in that aspect too.
For me, I feel like I also resonated with a lot of what of the women Meah interviewed, and sort of like for me academically, I'm the type of person like I don't say a lot in class at all, like out of fear of being like wrong and then everyone looking at me, or it was more just like I was the only woman of color or just person of color in a classroom, and kind of like I didn't want them to like look towards me to be like, oh, I'm the voice of like the Black community as a whole. And then in terms of housing and roommates, I've been fortunate enough that like I haven't had problems with in terms of like the dorm room, but like coming from again a predominantly like Black school, it was kind of like a shock to see like I guess being surrounded by so many people who weren't like me, and like when growing up, that's what I was used to. And then like kind of like not feeling welcome in the dorm halls, where there was like girls not like introducing themselves. They were like introducing themselves to like everyone else in the hall, but me and my roommate, who were the only people of color in our hall, or just racial profiling within the hall and saying like complaints coming to our room versus like, even though we weren't the ones like doing anything.
Academically, I really did resonate with being the only one in the classroom. However, I didn't really make myself as invisible as everyone would assume. I like to make myself respectively distinct, whether it be through my unique vocabulary, my vernacular, my enthusiastic like tones, and maintaining strong eye contact with all my professors and my peers, because eye contact does seem something intimidating where people usually look away, look down, look up. I like to look people directly in their eye, and that kind of reestablishes my dominance and just my power and presence in the classroom. In regards of like social life, I definitely beyond understand the culture shock that I experienced, because I was raised in a community of color, but not to a community that was my own. I was raised with Black and brown, Hispanic and Latin individuals, and I was one of the few African Black people there. So I had to also be a representative of Black people. Even though there were Black people there, they didn't identify with their Blackness. They identified with their Latin heritage. So I had to like master that there at home. And then coming here was a big culture shock, because I've never been around more than 4 white people at a time. And they were all my teachers and some few token students. But it was weird to like have people just stare at me in awe in like a weird direction. And like things like fashion, I didn't know what Lululemon was. I've heard about it. I never really, that wasn't the hot thing in my community. Like Canada Goose, Birkenstocks, those were not what I found fashionable. Those aren't things that those weren't things that I tapped into. So now I'm already isolated in terms like I'm highlighted in every room, but now my outfits are more distinct than anything, and my hair is more distinct than everything, and like I'm just the biggest outcast in the classroom. So I really did understand that. And in terms of housing, my roommate is such an interesting case because I participated in a program, Passport, which is offered to students of color in different communities. And my roommate, she is Guatemalan, but she is mistaken for being Asian, but she was raised in a white household. So I tried finding a sense of familiarity with her because like I grew up with a bunch of Hispanic children, and she didn't have that sense of relatability to me. Like we couldn't speak, you couldn't use Spanish terms that I assumed she would have known. We couldn't use like that, the culture and the music to relate to each other. And I've been very alienated from white culture, so I didn't really know how to talk to her beyond, we're both 18. So that was really interesting, but I really, really loved being with her. And in the halls of my dorm, everyone yells in my dorm, but I was regarded as the loud one. Me and my friends who rarely come over, we were regarded as the loud girls in the hall. So I like to keep them outside of my dorm just to avoid any type of connotations with me and my friend group. And eavesdropping the conversations I hear in my halls, I can see that they use terms I use, but not in the correct tenses. Like they use AAPE, like trendy TikTok or social media terms, but it's just not in the right context or verbiage, like usage. And it really confused me when I would talk to them, and they had no idea what I was talking about. And like I was the crazy one, and I just felt like slightly gaslit in those moments. But understanding these girls weren't there to harm or insult me or anything I've known, I just helped them very, very lightly from a good distance on like how to talk to others who aren't from the same place as you. And finally, with identity, I feel like when I came to Holy Cross, I had to redefine my blackness because again, I am African and black, but people don't see Ghanaian in me. They just see black girl. And so I'm seen as the representative for all black voices in every classroom. So I had to kind of dial that down because I am not a teacher. I'm a student. I don't have to teach everybody everything about blackness. And I had to really redefine my position in that. And when I would see black students on campus, I was so excited. I would be yearning for wow, there's another one. Wow, I've never seen you before. I'd be roaming around campus and I'd stare extra hard. I'm like, are they black or is this just a thick sweater? And when I would greet them, sometimes they weren't the black I was expecting, and I had to understand that I was invalidating their blackness and trying to reshape mine because I've never met that many different types of black people. I was already set with the one type of black person, and if anyone deviated from that, it's like, well, then you're not black enough. But then, look at me, I'm African. I'm not black enough. I'm not Black American enough for them. And it was just a whole contrast in me being here. So.
Can I say one thing if we have time? Or if we don't, it's fine.
No, it's okay.
I did want to know about identity. That Lily from the class of 82 really stuck out to me when she mentioned that she's never coming back she never came back after she graduated. And I never knew someone else had the same thought as me until today. Because I had that thought since sophomore year up until this morning, that after I graduate, I'm never coming back. And it goes to show that a lot of black people, black women here, really have experiences here, but they're really pushing through to get out until the work's done. So it's just refreshing to know that I'm not alone in this experience that I have as a black woman on this campus, but it's also really sad that I don't have an urge to have an alumni connection because of these experiences. So hearing her say that made me feel kind of refreshing, okay, this is not a singularity experience, but how can I take that experience and make it so I can possibly, hopefully come back one day because, yeah.
Thank you for sharing that. So my next question for you all is like, as you saw, I concluded with the understanding of the legacy of creative resilience in Black women college students here. And does any of this resonate with you?
I guess I'll go first. I put together, because Meah gave us this lovely paper, and all four of us were aggressively writing notes, if you guys can see. But on the paper, I circled attaining personal goals despite obstacles, finding one's community, and developing a firm value. And in the creative resilience aspect of your presentation, when you were concluding, you mentioned, I believe, I don't know if it's a poem or a story called Grandmother's Hands, and it's a song by Bill Withers, the same title. And in that story, in that song, he is talking about like the resilience of a Black woman and like how much she appreciates all the work that Black women do. And literally, those three things really just describe my last 3 years here at Holy Cross. Just trying to make it through with my own personal goals, find my people, and then stick to that and not deviate from whatever can come in the way of that. And it's just hard because, you know, when you have this experience of being a Black woman and having these intersectional identities that Professor Shorter talks about, because I'm in her Black feminist philosophy class, we highlighted about the intersectional identities can really make it hard for you to even have values or find your community or, you know, obtain personal goals despite your obstacles because you're being hit at different ends. So as a Black woman here on this campus, I feel like those three things really are my like pillars of my identity here at Holy Cross.
In terms of like creative resilience, I kind of thought of it like in terms of like my own personal growth. Because when I first came to Holy Cross, like I made it a mission to ensure that I wasn't the same person that I was freshman year coming into my senior year. And then like even like as like I'm also like a Africana Studies concentrator. So as I took more classes that dealt with like race, crime, and even African American history and things of that nature, I started realizing like things that I was doing every single day, like while I was on campus. Like I mentioned before, like I'm from New York, specifically Harlem, and I realized like I came from a predominantly Latinx and Black high school, and then coming to Holy Cross, I realized that I went from just being a student to being a student of color coming to this school. So like learning about like that transition, and even just like learning about how much of a racialized individual I am was definitely a humbling and like tough experience. And more about that, I realized that like I code switch a lot. I didn't realize what I was doing it until like, I don't remember what class I was in, but one of my professors had said, I think it was one of my classes last semester or this semester, Pop Culture, Race, and Sexuality with Professor Molly in the back. We had learned about like code switching, and I remember I was like talking to one of my white peers, and she had asked me, she was like, do you want to go get lunch later on? And I was like, yeah, totally. I'm from Harlem, I don't say totally. So I realized that like, you know, even like now, like that was like freshman year, and like now like I'm more comfortable like speaking the way I usually talk to like all of my peers, because I should be respected regardless of like my accent or how I talk. I grew up in a predominantly Black neighborhood, and it doesn't necessarily mean that I'm any less than what is considered the standard of professionalism and things of that nature. And then also, I circled finding one's community in terms of creative resilience on the document Meah provided us. And the way I found my community is I do hair on campus, and doing hair on campus like allowed me to find my community. I just believe that doing hair is such an intimate activity, and every person who's like hair, like I've had the privilege of doing, we've had such great conversations, and it also allowed me to strengthen the relationship like I have with my hair. If you knew me freshman year, I did not like my hair. I never like showed my hair out. Like it was just like a really like tough thing for me to do. But even now, like I wear braids obviously, but like when I have my natural hair out, like people come up to me, they give me compliments, and it took me a really long time to have my hair out now. So I guess like that's one of the parts of how I build a community be here, just like allowing people to, or people allowing me to enter their space and, you know, share activities with them.
As someone that frequently has Allison do their hair, it's a beautiful experience. Do we want to move on, or do you want to answer this one? Up to you.
We can move on. Wait, so answer, you can answer. Do you want to answer or do you want to move on?
Okay, so one last question for the panelists, and then we'll transition to a Q&A. Were there any things you wish I talked about or that I maybe didn't hit on?
You two can start
You
answering.
know?
You two
One,
should start
'cause-
answering those things.
Okay. For me, I feel like you kind of touched on it, but I don't know if it's just because like maybe they didn't have that experience, but kind of like there's the culture shock of like coming from a predominantly like Black community and then coming to here where it's a predominantly white community. And then there's also like the culture shock within the Black community, I think, that you realize, oh, not all Black people here are like the people you knew back home, versus that like me personally, I came from like most of the people in my community were like Haitian, East African, West African, and Hispanic, or like Latino. And then so I came here, and then most of the people, not most, but like I'd ask people where they were from, and I'd expect like an ethnicity or like a Caribbean island or something, and they'll just say like, oh, I'm from, I don't know, like Michigan, Detroit. And I'm just like, no, like, where are you from? And then they'll be like, no, like, they're just, like, their parents are born here, they're just Black. And I was just like, oh, like, that's a thing. I forgot, like, kind of like coming from, like, where, kind of like back home, people, when I asked where they were from, I'd usually get, like, Haitian, Ghanaian, wherever it was, Ethiopian.
Thank you for sharing that.
I agree. Finding the diversity within diversity, like in the Black community, there's just so many types of Black people that I was not familiar with, and I didn't think I'd find that at a PWI. And seeing that, like Sagine was right, I would be used to hearing ethnicities rather than hearing Michigan and Wisconsin. I'm like, okay, there's that. And another thing is like I feel like maybe you should not maybe you should touch on, you did great, but it's like I expected to hear about how when we return to our communities, how do we take Holy Cross with us, and how do we take being at an institution like Holy Cross back home, because when I come back home and I return to Rhode Island, I'm shocked with how different everyone else has lived compared to me, because I was busy like learning things new while they stuck with what's familiar with them, and that's not any shame, any bad on that. But then I'm introduced to a new type of introduction, because like now I'm a different person, and now you have to reintroduce yourself to me. And so maybe navigating all Black spaces and all Black times, because we just keep growing, and just seeing how we kind of lose that sense of familiarity from our original community.
That's fantastic. Insightful.
Do you want to go?
Oh, you?
I can go.
Y'all go last.
I think one thing that I would have loved to like hear about is like also like the first generation like college experience, both first generation college and American as well, and the pressures associated with that. Because I know like for a lot of us, like some of us are the first in our families to go to college. There's a lot of parental pressures that are associated with that, especially like freshman year. Like with a lot of my friends, we all endured like the same thing. And I've seen throughout the course of like our 4 years, like a lot of us like changed our like majors, our career paths, and that was a really like tough transition for like a lot of us. I can even say for myself. So it would have been interesting to like learn about that. And then also kind of like what you guys were saying, the diversity within the diversity in the Black community, learning about the Black spectrum. Especially like for me per se, like I grew up in an urban city, and a lot of my friends grew up in like the suburbs. And I didn't realize that there's a lot of like different values that are associated with each of the environments that people have like grew up in. Because like a lot of my friends who grew up in the suburbs have cars and licenses. I'm from New York, I'll take that bus. So like just learning about that and how it impacts your growth, your transition, your perspective here on campus as well would have been nice to hear.
And I'll be very brief. To basically follow up on what everyone said, the conversation of being Black within Black people. The big thing that I wish, maybe it's not the same for everyone, but colorism and palpability. There's 4 dark-skinned women on the panel, So our experiences are very, very telling. Not only within other Black people or within other POCs, like I can tell because I'm a darker skinned Black person that it's harder for some even faculty or peers to approach me in a certain way, or like the way I say things or the way I do things kind of rub off the wrong way. And I wish I heard more about the experiences of darker skinned women on this campus, because that's a group of women who have such a unique experience because of the fact they're just a little bit darker than everyone else they hang out with. Lastly, mental health. That's one thing I feel like, excuse me, as Black women on campus, there's not a lot of conversation about. A lot of the things we heard was like, I made it through it, I pushed through, I pushed. But there's no conversation of like healing and taking care of ourselves and really focusing on like, how are we, or like the struggles we face mentally while being here on campus, because I'm gonna be so real, it is hard to be at Holy Cross as a student, period, but as a Black woman, that is a whole different conversation. We're expected to be activists, moms, teachers, RAs, best friends, sisters, like we're expected to be everywhere at once, and that's a lot. So I wish there was more conversations on how, they navigated and handled that, because our identities can be so many different things, but it can be all pushed back against us at once, because I came here freshman year, and it was cool, it was all right, and then like the first 3 days in, some white lady come up here talking about the diversity delusion, and that changed the whole narrative of culture on campus. Now I have to learn how to organize, protests and all these different kinds of things, learn how to communicate. So that alone was a very stressful and a mentally taxing thing that we never took time to really sit down and digest as Black people, let alone as Black women who were leading it. So, yeah.
Well, thank you for that. So I'm going to now welcome Professor Freeman to moderate a few Q&As for those of you who want to stick around.
Meah, Meah, can I prevail upon you to say something yourself about this last thing? Because there were so many times when you came in, it could be from track practice, it could be from a meeting, it could be a friend coming to you saying, will you do this for me? How did you reclaim your own center? I mean, every once in a while I told you, take a walk, do some deep breaths, whatever, but how did you do it?
Honestly, I did it because of women, right, like at the panel, like the panelists I have right here. I think the Black community and the Black women specifically have kept me going. I can say I have an amazing group of like these other 3 Black girls, who's 2 of them are here right now. One of them's away, but I understand. But what I'm trying to make is that it's through like having a community, and it's through knowing that some of it's worth it, and knowing that like a lot of what I do, I center for being uplifting Black voices, hearing Black voices, seeing Black voices. So I guess when it comes to the experiences that I kind of outlined in this presentation, I certainly resonate with them. I resonate a lot with what my panelists say as well. And I think that it really just goes to show that what really keeps us going is the Black women community, and it's realizing the goals we have and how we're all trying to drive each other to those goals. And as for everything else, you guys brought really interesting perspectives on things I had not thought of in the entirety of my presentation and my research and so forth. So I thank you guys for that, because those were beautiful contributions. And I think my last thing I'll say is Ashley's point about mental health is also super, super important. I didn't get to get into it in the presentation, but a lot of women had some tough experiences here, tough experiences. So if I can offer one thing, is that we need to have some more BIPOC counseling center, counseling resources and so forth, because a lot of women are struggling with things like this, and like our community and our therapy is each other, and we need to work on having other outlets for therapy as well.
Amazing. Thank you. Great, really terrific panel, by the way, so thank you for that. We would love to have some questions, and we'd like you to come up to the center and speak in the microphone if you have them, and don't be afraid to do that. But we'll be surprised if you don't have it. Please.
Okay, I can speak up. It was. That's for the recording. Oh. Hello. Wonderful presentation. What you guys had to bring, was absolutely amazing. In regards to this,
this kind of fear in regards to your academic life of not being able to like raise your hands in class because you don't want people to attribute you being wrong with being Black? I know I'm not the right person to ask this question, but like what can professors do? What can people in higher authority do to assist Black students in not having this fear of if I raise my hands in class, I'm wrong, then people will think it's because I'm Black?
I guess some of my favorite professors, the best way I can answer it, some of my favorite professors were the ones that just let me be in class and didn't make my, I guess, existence a part of the class, but try to encourage everyone to really work together and like help each other exist amongst the class. So being very straightforward about, you know, their ethics, what they stand for, what they will not stand for. I really appreciated professors seeing me at office hours personally and being like, hey, can I talk to you? I noticed you didn't raise your hand in class. Like, why aren't you saying anything? Like, you're so smart. Like, those things like that really push me to want to be more participative and want to be more active. I feel like taking that extra step to seeing, you know, that one Black kid in your class is really helpful because they feel seen and they'll feel comfortable amongst their peers.
I think she sums it up nicely. And I also would say in my own experience, being in classes that talk about race comfortably, like without a problem, is helpful too, because if we have culturally competent professors and they're egging classmates to also be culturally competent, it makes it more of an environment where it's like, okay, like I can relax. Like it's, you know what I mean? Like we're aware of like this, of me being the only one, we're aware of what's going on. We're not being blinded by all of it. So I think when I'm in classrooms where like, and I personally feel like it could be econ, it could be STEM, it could be, I feel like every class can have a place for a conversation about race. Yeah. And I think that really goes a long way in making someone comfortable in the classroom.
Yeah.
Hello. Just
Hi,
a
Mom.
quick question. One of the things that a lot of you resonate is that you said that I got the feeling that you couldn't wait for it to be over.
Mm.
And I wanted to really know if you had to do it all over again, would you do it? And my follow-up to that was to a lot of you said that you felt like, and I've heard Meah say that, why does she have to feel like she's the teacher? Why do I have to teach everybody about Black people? But if you don't do it to other people sometimes because they don't know they did it wrong, who would? But if you had to do it all over again, would you? Because there are HBCUs, CUs out there. Would you do this over again at this institution?
That's a good question.
It's a great question.
I definitely would do it all over again and twice and 3 times as many times as I need, because I know the girls in my hall who or the kids I'm around who just aren't culturally aware, they're not doing it out of willing ignorance. They just have not been accustomed to things. Same way I'm not accustomed to their culture and the way they live. So I'll definitely do it again. I just don't like the expectation that I have to do it. Like, I have to be the one to explain racism. I have to be the one to explain what happened during slavery. And especially when it's like common sense things. Like during Black History Month, I was on the BSU board, not board, sorry. I was in the committee, and I wore like a shirt just about like representing BSU, and they just thought I was like, oh, ask me about everything about Blackness. And I couldn't answer the questions as fluent, as eloquent as I wanted to, and I felt like I was hurting their intelligence when they could have, and I always said, you could just Google this, right? And someone said, no, I'd rather just hear it from you. And I'm like, no, you should probably Google this. Like, I don't think this is right. So it's just the expectation to, I don't have to teach you. You can do these things yourself, because I learned myself. Not through my experience, but through my, searching.
Yeah, to be really candid, my first choice was HBCU. That was my first choice. Betty and I actually got accepted to our top choice together. So when money wasn't an option, this was. And let me tell you, Holy Cross is generous. They are generous, so I'm not complaining. No, HBCU would have been so nice. Culture, get to be around people, but financially it was a no-no. There was other social and class issues within HBCUs that nobody talks about either. So that would have been a different experience in and of its own. And since HBCUs are not privately funded, then I'm in the same situation that I was in high school, where I don't have resources, where I don't have internships, where I don't have access to things that will benefit me in the long run. In high school, I don't know, like high school was really hard because we didn't have a lot. And I didn't want to relive that for an experience that I've already had. But with that being said, would I do Holy Cross again? As a junior who's almost done, I don't know. I mean, I'd probably do it one more time, but I'd do it very different. And I'd be much more intentional about how I went about things. But I think I did a pretty good job up until now. And I would say on the topic of educating my peers who may be falling into ignorance, I think a very rewarding experience of my time here at Holy Cross was becoming co-chair at BSU. And the number one thing that I really like about being co-chair at BSU is that I don't have to answer those questions about racism. You'll see it on the page because we talk about it every single day. And that's where Mia's comment about like being racially conscious in class comes in. It's not my job to teach you about racism. You got to pass for over 400 years to skip that. Now it's your job to relearn and to be smarter. That's why you go here. That's why we have access to such great educational systems. All I'm saying is just don't waste your parents' money being racist when you can just like take one class and just not be racist.
Or a quick Google search.
Yeah, quick Google search can solve your problem.
Anybody else want to field that question?
Yeah, I can answer. I definitely would do it again. Like, I'm in my senior year now, and to be honest, like, I've had constant conversations with my friends who attend, like, other similar institutions, and they all share the same remnants, so if I could do it in another school, I just might as well just come here again. And in terms of, like, what you guys were saying about, white folks coming up to you guys and, like, using you guys as, like, emotional or, like, educational, like, laborers, like, there has to be, like, there, at some point, especially, like, our senior year, or even just, like, freshman year, or things of that nature, like, there's some type of agency that you have to think about for yourself. Like, do you want to be the same person, like I mentioned earlier, do you want to be the same person that you were freshman year coming into your senior year? If you know that you have some biases, like, address that. There are multiple classes here on campus that provide you with the outlet to learn about racism. Like you guys said, like, you can just do a quick little Google search. The premise of my existence is not centered around my oppression. It's not always my job to teach you how you should treat human beings, honestly. Yeah, so I definitely would do it again. And then if I was to do it again, you know, hopefully people or like white folks feel like more inclined to take the classes that they need so that we're not serving as emotional laborers during our time here.
And I guess to add on to my point about being co-chair, it's also an opportunity for me to focus on my community. Like Alison said, my oppression isn't my existence. So when I'm in charge of an organization where my job is to uplift people, I shouldn't have to also be teaching people. So if I could focus my energy around kind of like what creative resilience is about, is finding community, developing values within my own community, and then in turn, if someone gets educated because of that, cool. But I don't want it to be because I sat down and took a racism 101 class with you, when I could be helping my peers navigate their way through Holy Cross.
I also want to say really quickly, diction and rhetoric matter when discussing things concerning Black and brown people. Because oftentimes, like, I hear people like say, like, I'm gonna go to this BSU event to support like the Black students on campus. When in reality, we don't want your sympathy. We really just want to be looked at as equals. Like people, like when you guys go to like BSU events and things of that nature, like don't view it as charity, but rather an opportunity for you to see outside of yourself.
You gonna answer that question?
I almost want to, but I feel like they had it all, honestly. I really do. I mean, to answer the question, would I do it all over again? Absolutely. The reason I say so is very similar to Alison. I feel like Holy Cross has given a lot of lessons. And I will also say, like, in a way, like, we definitely have a long way to go, but at least, like, as an Africana Studies major, at least I have an opportunity to take those classes and learn, like, also learn myself. So I think that's something valuable because, like, in my earlier my earlier educational experience when I spoke in my presentation, I didn't get any of that. All I learned about was Harriet Tubman. like, you know what I'm saying? So, like, I got to see the beauty in being a Black person, the celebration of being Black. And so I will say Holy Cross has an opportunity for all students to do it, and I feel like a lot of people miss the ball doing so. And if they do it, it's out of the wrong intentions. So I would do it all over again, and if I was to do it all over again, I probably would do it the same way, I'm not gonna lie. Oh, yeah.
Other questions? We still have time for a couple more.
So my question is, Meah, your presentation reminded me of kind of Du Bois's theory of double consciousness. So kind of like this internal conflict where you navigate society kind of in a conflicting manner because you don't know how to present yourself and also how society views you. So I guess my question would be, what is your piece of advice just navigating Holy Cross being a Black woman?
I think that's a great question. When I first came to the college, I was definitely, and I think it's interesting too, because I came from schools that were predominantly white. So you would think I came here and I was like, oh, okay, just like it used to be. Absolutely not. Like I got introduced into a whole, I still had a culture shock. So what I will say is like, one piece of advice I would give, in my own experience, I can only speak for me, is don't care. I know it sounds easier said than done, but like when you kind of like liberate yourself from like the code switching, or you liberate yourself from like the, oh, I have to speak a certain way, or oh, this person thinks this, it becomes easier. Like there's been times I've called classmates out in class for what things they've said. There's been times where I'll say, excuse me, professor, like we need to rewind, hear that conversation again, and you need to call them out. Like when you like get to a space when you're able to do that and like hold people accountable, then I think it really opens doors in terms of like, you know, like becoming like yourself in all spaces. And again, I'm still working on doing that, but I realized when I'm unapologetically Black and I'm also like holding other people accountable and letting them know like that was wrong, you can't do that, or like why do you think that, then it becomes easier. And I think that part of it becomes complicated because you're in a classroom where you're the only person that would be doing it, or you're in a social space where you're the only person that would be doing it, and there's been times where like people are like, why'd you say that? And it's like, why didn't you say that, you know? So I feel like we all just have to come to a place where we're comfortable being who we are in all the spaces. Like, talk how you would with, like how I would with the panelists, how I would with a white student too, or a other student of color. So that's my opinion. I don't know if anyone.
That's it, yeah. That's pretty much it. Yeah.
Thank you for a really illuminating presentation and panel. In higher ed, there are a lot of narratives about the participation and inclusion of groups of marginalized identities, so including Black women, right? There are narratives of justice, there are narratives of kind of instrumental narratives about how including groups, including people of diverse identities enhances the overall environment for everyone. Do you have any reflections on how these narratives affect the experiences of people who are, you know, of students? And what kinds of narratives that maybe you don't see out there that would be more conducive to inclusion and for people to feel that they really own the learning space?
I think personally hearing the narratives of people's experiences or relationships with like, is it the experiences of like being Black or being a Black woman in higher ed? I think they're important because they really do map out a framework of how to navigate for people that will come after us. So Allison's leaving soon, I'm gonna leave soon. So the way we are constantly always thinking and changing about the way we approach and deal with different things is so necessary because we have so many needs, and it's one thing to just meet the needs directly just for the time being, but it's another thing to meet the needs for the entirety of the people that will come before us. So things like this really do meet those needs because people are listening to us talk, hearing our experiences and conversations, and then they get to navigate and adjust their frameworks on how they approach things because they've heard someone say it. So yeah, I think the more that we are intentional of having genuine conversations with people or putting them in a position where they're not a teacher, but more so of a storyteller, or more so of like a person who's like just saying how they feel or just saying their experience, really helps higher ed professors, faculty, staff alike really know how to navigate and approach and interact with us on a normal basis without making it seem like too performative or too social justice-y, just more natural and fluid.
Anyone else want to respond to that one?
She hit the nail on the head.
You?
Thank you all for sharing, and thank you for all the work that you guys do to make this community what it is. So I want to ask, what can we as a Holy Cross community do for you all? And I want to hear your perspective on that, so we can start to, think about those things that we can possibly do.
That's a hard question.
Yeah.
And we get asked that a lot, I feel. I mean, in my position, I feel like I get asked that very often, and I still don't know how to answer it.
I would,
Okay.
you go first.
I'd say one thing for me personally is like also like hiring more like staff that like look like us or more women of color, because there's been like I've had like maybe one class where my professor was either a woman or like a woman of color, and then I felt like I feel more comfortable. Well, personally for me, like that class, I was more likely to like raise my hand, ask questions, or just even like talk to her about like stuff that I was having trouble with in class, just because like I feel like one, it helps also just to like see someone in that position to be like, okay, like I can like do this. They're on like the same like track, I guess, as me. And then also two, having a professor who is like a woman of color or that identifies as that also helps because I forgot the second part of what I was gonna say. But hold on, you can go if you want.
Yeah, throughout the hiring process, just more qualified and conscious individuals. It's always nice to see yourself in your professor in a leadership position, but I'd rather have more conscious, like racially conscious professors, because I could have a black teacher, but my white teacher is more understanding of me, because everyone's entitled to their own opinions despite their study and professionalism. So I'd rather have people who are more able to like touch on these subjects without making me feel like a target, but still making me feel included. And also, in like the white student body or just non-black student body, come to events, because you're not infiltrating black spaces. I remember we had a black faculty dinner, and the attendance wasn't the greatest because people thought it was blacks only. And it sounds like a preposterous idea, but like really no one felt welcomed. And I feel like whenever the BSU or any black person invites you to the space, you should take that as an opportunity to like come in and feel comfortable, not to do it as an act of service, but to just to be there and participate like an equal.
I'm going to look at this question from my 3 different lives I explore. So I would say in academic life, professors, classmates, and so forth can be gentle. I think we forget that black women aren't just black women. A lot of people can be first generation, like in terms of their college experience, or also in America in general. I think there's so many different intersections, and they also have to deal with like financial circumstances in some cases, or family life, or so many other things. So I think when we often look at like black women, we look at them, and this is why I try to debunk the idea of resilience so much, is we look at them as so strong and powerful and able to do anything. But really, people need to be like gentle, you know what I mean? We have to realize that we're just like every other Holy Cross student, but have so many more layers than probably the typical Holy Cross student. I think it's fair to say that. So I see that with a lot of professors and students, like we're seen as visible and invisible at the same time. We're visible in terms of being strong and can do it all, but invisible in terms of really seeing who we are. So when I think about social life, now as basic or as funny as this may seem, I think also white spaces need to welcome black students as well into those spaces. I go to parties, and I'm sorry, and not to turn into that, but I go to parties, and it's the same type of music. There's no diversity in the music, and you don't realize how long of a way that goes when you're in a space and the music is something you're used to. But when you go there in these spaces, it's like, oh, you're not allowed to come in because you're not on this team, or because you're a black girl, or because of this, that, and the other. I hear so many experiences that many black women feel that way. So I feel like if we are to think about social life, like something as small as music change, or something as small as like an invite to a party that you normally wouldn't go to, can go a long way. And then I guess in identity, I would say something very similarly to academic life, which is just be gentle. Like we forget that college is also a point in time where everyone's changing. Like you come in at 18, you leave at 21 or 22. Those are so many pivotal points of your entire life. And so I think when we think about it, so many women are continuing to form identities. Like I'm personally not the same me I was freshman year. And I think that people need to recognize that, and also the layers of that experience when you're also a black woman. So like the things that change in terms of like who you are in the classroom, what classes you like to take, who you want to be, what you do on campus. Like, all those considerations need to be made. So I would say that.
One thing I'd say socially is also like, even listening, simple thing as like listening and kind of just like taking our experiences seriously, and kind of just like, I've had times where like I've had an issue, I brought it up, and then like nothing happened. So I was just like, okay, why am I even talking about my issues or saying anything if nothing's gonna happen? So I kind of just like stay in silence and just endure, and then that turns into other issues. And kind of just like, cause that also helps us like be seen as equal too, cause like we'll have an issue, nothing happens, and then our peer will have like, our white peer will have like a similar issue, or if not even like less than that, like a smaller, like housing thing for me was like I had a issue with people in my hall, and then like I brought it up, nothing happened. It continued happening, so I just like, at this point I don't say anything, because when I do say things, nothing happens. But like other people are getting moved to like other rooms, or like their problems are being fixed for something that wasn't as even, like the severity of the, I don't know how to say, infractions or like issues weren't the same, but they're getting moved.
I would just say, like, really briefly, just stand up for Black women. Like, 90% of our lives is just standing up for ourselves, speaking for ourselves, standing for ourselves, taking care of ourselves. And I mean that as a Holy Cross community, and not just like directly at like the white community, because there's some aspects of even our own POC community that still tends to deviate into disrespecting and not hearing Black women. I think the more that people intentionally include us in conversations, stand up for us when things are going on directly towards us, having a sense of like protection is what's really necessary. Because like Meah keeps reiterating, we don't have like a time to be gentle. We don't have a time to really do things for ourselves. Every instance where there's a moment of like getting stuff done, Black women are in the middle of it. There's got to be a navigation within like Holy Cross as a community where they're standing up for us, and I've never seen it. So I feel like that's the best way that I guess Holy Cross can help Black women, is to stand up for us intentionally and consistently.
You know, if I can just put Meah on the spot for a second. You know, throughout our work together, you also had to learn how to be vulnerable in some ways, because you wanted to be on top of it all the time, and sometimes you couldn't be. And I think it was important for you to kind of find a place within yourself to say, you know, okay, I need some support through this. I need some help through this. And you were able to do that. And I found those to be really kind of wonderful moments, because another layer of you, beyond that loud smiling person who liked to, hey, you got fuller and more complex and more multidimensional. Somebody else was going to.
Okay. So my question is, you guys talked a lot about a culture shock, and I was wondering if there was also a career shock, because in my experience, if you're first gen Caribbean or Ethiopian, like you learn the word doctor before you learn your name. So I wondered if like you came to Holy Cross thinking you were going to be a doctor, lawyer, accountant, nurse, or anything, and then if that changed.
I was bio pre-med, like headstrong. I was like, yeah. And then I went to my first bio class. I said, I have other options, so I'm gonna take those other options. And now I'm a psych neuroscience minor. That's a whole like switch. So, oh yeah, I came here thinking I was gonna be a doctor. Not because I wanted to be a doctor, because my mom wanted me to be a doctor. But I feel like that happens to a lot of students here at Holy Cross. They just come here, doctors on the move, and then you take that first bio class, and you're like, wait a minute, if I can't even pass bio, what makes you think I'm gonna be a doctor? But I feel like the main reason as to why I deviated from bio pre-med is because I didn't see anyone who was Black. I mean, I was the only Black woman in my bio class. I love Professor Mondu down, but I was the only Black woman in that whole class, and that was really, really hard for me.
Yeah, I had also a similar experience as well. Like, I also started off pre-med like a lot of other African and Caribbean and of students here. And then, like, in terms of, like, a career shock, like, I never considered, like, any other, like, career path. Like, until like I came here. Like I know like when I come to college, like professors are out there working, people in the offices, they're working too, but I never actually sat down and considered what their occupation entailed until like I actually sat down with professors and like had the conversations with them. And even like talking to some of like my like white peers and things of that nature. Like I remember I spoke to someone freshman year and they're like, I'm studying economics to become an auditor, and I had no idea what that meant. I was just like, oh, is that like German for doctor? Yeah, so career shock is definitely something that I didn't factor into my college experience, but I'm glad that it happened to me because now like I'm on a path that I was intended to and not a path that my mom and dad did. Because at the end of the day, like it says Alison Apeku, not Alison's mom and Alison. So
What is an auditor though?
who knows what an auditor is? I still don't know. I think, I don't know, something with the IRS.
Something, man. Oh, you're right.
I'm a freshman, so I'm still in the starting phases, but I'm very, very grateful my mom never tried forcing any career down my throat, because I know for a fact I did not want to do anything in STEM, far from pre-med. I'm in economics, which is the +E is STEM, which I really do appreciate, but like it was a good field. No, I just don't know what I want to continue because I'm starting to notice I love sociology a lot more than I love economics. And the only fear I have is that I don't have I don't have examples of successful sociology people, like, because I'm here for an education, yes, but the income afterwards is what impresses my family. It's what I want myself to. I don't mind admitting that. And I'm really struggling on how to like become a professional in that field without being pretentious and without being too money focused. So if I graduate with the I don't know, with BSBA, I'm really just waiting.
If it makes you feel better in any way, I still have the career path I want to do like Allison, but my major is my own. So like you can really make anything out of anything here. That's what's great about this school that I really learned is that you can be in anything major and still be very, very wealthy. So I think since you are just like a freshman, I think it'll just take a lot of time on navigating that out. I mean, it's just harder because, like everyone mentioned, being a Black woman and trying to like navigate your own career and by yourself with nobody who looks like you helping you doing it is really hard.
For me, I kind of had the opposite experience, like from Ashley and Allison. Like I had no idea, I'm a sophomore, but I had no idea what I wanted to do. And it kind of scared me because like everyone else was going in like, oh, bio, econ, like they knew what they wanted to do. And like it took me until like spring? Last semester, I think, I declared.
Yesterday, I declared.
My I had a sociology major, and kind of just like, I had the same idea too. Like, even before like declaring though, I kind of sat down with the professor and was just like, okay, like realistically, what can I do with my sociology? If I like to choose to like this path, what can I do with it? And kind of like, because I was really enjoying the classes as well, and kind of like I wanted to do, because I felt like, and that's another thing, when I like my classes, I'm more likely to like participate and speak up, but like the classes I was in, I didn't really find interesting, or like it felt like it didn't pertain to me, so I was just like sitting in the back, kind of just taking it in.
Be sure to take stuff that interests you and nourishes you. Right? You've already shown that you'll find your way, right? One last question. You get to ask.
I was wondering if you guys could speak to like the relationship between Black and women.
Y'all can take that. I'm not doing that. I'm good.
Wow.
I'm gonna be.
Wow, that's
I guess I can start on a more like lighter note. There really is no relationship between Black women and Black men here on campus. I guess from experience personally, I went to a predominantly Black school. So Black men loved Black women on campus. Not even in like the romantic sense. Like socially, we hung out with each other, like we talked to each other. It was very, very normal. And then coming here, it was just like a different culture. because I'm also dealing with not black men who didn't go to predominantly black spaces, black men who go to predominantly white spaces, private spaces, wealthier spaces than I am, even different regions. Like, it's like different. So it's not like there's not a relationship because nobody's trying. It's just, I feel like it's really hard to like read and navigate them sometimes, because it's just, I feel like I mentioned earlier, there's no protection or no necessarily like an urge to stand up or to like be kind of like that supportive aspect that we usually need as just another black person on this campus. There's a lot of social and identity disconnects too that cause a lot of conflicts with, I would say, black women and black men here on campus. So that's why a lot of times we do feel alone in our existence here, because black men really don't show sometimes that they're with us or for us. They're more comfortable being in predominantly white spaces because in all candidacy, white people are more palpable and accept black men more than they accept black women. So because of that, I feel like that natural acceptance into white culture, and that they don't have to really like, I guess, fight their way out of it or face any type of direct oppression, because the only oppression they face is that they're black. But as a man and being more accepted in that culture, like, it's just really hard to get to them sometimes. Like, yeah, that's just how I personally feel. It's a big disconnect sometimes.
Meah, some people spoke to that in your work.
Yes.
If you could share some of that, that'd be great.
So what Ashley says is very much echoed in my work. What we see is not only, I guess, the lack of support from black men romantically, but also in terms of just like being there, and like the same feelings that black women felt with each other was not replicated with black men and black women. What we see is that, like Ashley said, many black men come to enjoy other spaces more, or feel like you use I'll say privilege, because I do think that being a black male on a Holy Cross campus is a very privileged status. And what I see is that many of the black women voiced that they weren't there for them. Like, everything as small as like coming to a talk like this that black men didn't show out for, or if something happens in like with a white teammate or a white friend that a black man witnesses, that they don't speak up. So we see a lot of black men, like, I guess, not always being there for many black women. Of course, there's always the sprinkle of them in there that are, you know, love a black man from infinity to infinity. But what I'm trying to make is, when it comes to on a more general and larger scale, a lot of black men like have a lot of work to do when it comes to supporting black women, uplifting black women, and hearing black women. And I'll also note that a lot of the black women I interviewed mentioned the football team, because a large population of black men is on that team. And what they mentioned in that respect is that, like, even in like party scenes, or even in like walking past them, some black men just like keep their head up and don't say hi. So there's that issue that many women voiced, and I think a lot of women, I think, can attest to in the present day, feel very similarly.
Yeah, and I guess for dating, we're just not desired. I mean, like I said, they come from predominantly white spaces, so we're not the people they're picking. And, you know, that's another difficulty too, because as a black woman personally, who also loves black men, you're here trying to navigate a dating experience that you just can't get 5 minutes away from your dorm. So, yeah.
Yeah, and in regards of like romance and attraction, as a black woman, you don't find that with a black man here on Holy Cross Camp, not the soil here. And it's nothing insulting to them or anything. It's like they just haven't been around black women beyond their familiar. That's an assumption that I'm comfortable saying. They haven't been around black women beyond their mother and sister. So when you do encounter them, they expect a motherly or maternal or sisterly figure from you, without like understanding boundaries. And in terms of friendship or just coexisting as like peers, they are standoffish, and I find them to be a little bit more insecure in their blackness, because I'm a freshman, so I'm coming with a freshman class who just came here, rather than like other classes who have been here. And since we're fresh from our backgrounds, they feel the need to prove their blackness to me, because I'm their black representative, not just for the white people, but to them too. And I hear them saying homegirl, homie, nigga a lot more around me, and that's not something I usually do, or I don't say homegirl, or I don't say things like that, but they overdo it in an attempt to like prove their masculinity, their blackness to me, which is kind of like strange, and when they see I'm not like receptive of that same thing, they just push me away, isolate me, and they return back to their comfort within like white people, which isn't terrible, but it's like I wanted to become a friend to you, but because I didn't like maintain that role that you had in your head, I just can't achieve any relationship with you.
I also want to add in my own personal experience, separating me as researcher Meah and like student Meah. I'll say a lot of Black men and a lot of like my Black girlfriends, we view a lot of things very differently. Like the things that we won't tolerate, I see a lot of Black men tolerating. Whether that's hearing the N-word at a party or someone treating them a certain way, or even like just small things I notice and pick up on the classroom and like how people speak to them. Like it's just something they don't come to realize. So I guess for lack of a better word, I think a lot of Black women here are a lot more woke, I guess, when it comes to like the realities and experiences we're having. And I think a lot of Black men don't like see the world very similarly. So I think like in my position, it's very frustrating when you're with someone that like looks like you and who like is navigating the same campus that they just don't see like what's really going on. And I see that also a trend in a lot of the research I have. Like there's been experiences where like someone will call like Black students that were protesting like monkeys and something like that, and then like a Black male student will hear it and just be like, oh, do, like, you know what I mean? Like there's no advocacy there. There's no like recognition of what's really happening. And I'll say that this doesn't apply to all Black men. Like, you know, like I want to keep reinforcing that, but like I do want to say that like when it comes to the general population, and some of my Black guy friends be like, Meah, stop doing that to us. You can't group us with them. And I'm like, unfortunately, like when it comes to all Black men, there's a lot of work that can be done in terms of their advocacy and even supporting like their own clubs and organizations like BSU.
Yeah, it's not all.
Yeah, I want to quickly add something like in terms of like protection from like Black men. Sometimes, well, a lot of the times it's not there. And a lot of the times, Black women also bear a lot of emotional labor for Black men on this campus. Like our energy is taken away from us, and then we often get nothing in return because they assume that we got it. Like I've heard like a lot of times, like throughout my experience here, like people would be like, "Oh, you're an independent Black woman. You got this. You got." No, I don't. Please help me. Like, and I can't stress that enough. Like they just automatically assume that just because we carry a lot of stuff. Like we have multiple positions on campus, we're also managing like our lives back home, academic lives as well. Like just because we carry all of it doesn't mean that it's heavy, you know? If you could do anything to support us, please let's do it.
They call you my queen for 20 minutes, don't remember your name the next day.
I also find them to be more, not rude, but like more in perpetuating like negative and harmful stereotypes against Black women and Black people in general than non-Black counterparts. Like they feel way more comfortable using slavery jokes, degrading racial remarks, and they see it as a joke because they haven't been humiliated in that type of way, and that's just what I've noticed so far.
Amazing panel. I wanted to mention one other thing. I don't know if you recall, but I had said earlier that Meah had won a couple of awards. She won the Redican Medal. She won the Carter Woodson Prize. And I just wanted to let her and you know that as of now, you also have research honors in psychology. All right, well, you want to speak?
That wraps it up. Thank you all for coming. This was like, made me really nervous. I was scared, but I'm glad to have all of your support in my research endeavors and just me as a person. So, and again, thank you to JD Power, McFarland Center, Professor Freeman, Professor Shorter Burhanu, and my beautiful panelists, for, you know, embarking on this journey with me. And that means a lot. So thank you.